Before taking her seat that day in 1981, she paused by our table and said something like, "Hello, Gloria. Nice to see you. What handsome young men you have here." That sort of thing. Carter and I stood and took turns shaking her gloved hand. We'd had a lot of practice being well-behaved young men, making good impressions when out with our mother. The conversation was brief, which was probably for the best. I could tell right away my mom didn't like Mrs. Astor. Later, when I asked her why not, she said she just never grabbed me, which was classic Gloria. My mom rarely said bad things about people, but when she did, she had a lexicon all her own. Dreadful was her harshest criticism, usually reserved for someone who was very pushy or rich and money-obsessed. Vincent Astor was dreadful, she later informed me, speaking about Brooke's third husband, whose name and fortune Brooke had inherited after 5.5 often miserable years of marriage. I've since learned, while researching this book, that nearly everyone who knew Vincent described him similarly. So when my mom said that Brooke Astor just never grabbed her, I knew exactly what she meant. I suppose someone walking down Lexington Avenue that afternoon and looking through Mortimer's expansive picture window might have been intrigued to see Gloria Vanderbilt, then 57 years old, and 79-year-old Brooke Astor, the last two exemplars of Gilded Age New York, dining shoulder to shoulder. Had iPhones existed then, a passerby might even have snapped a picture and posted it on Instagram, #iconic. Their reasonable assumption would have been that these high-profile women had much in common beyond glittering last names. Elegant fashions, powerful friends, and well-appointed homes. My mom had, in fact, lived for several years in the same penthouse apartment at 10 Gracie Square that Mrs. Astor had once lived in. But in most ways, the two women could not have been more different. Despite the name Vanderbilt, which she used only in professional settings, and all that came with it, Gloria had little interest in the social world in which Brooke Astor lived, ruled, and reveled. Though my mother also found herself in serious financial straits at times, she would never have married a man like Vincent Astor for his money as Brooke had. My mom did not attend gala benefits or play canasta or gossip with other ladies and gentlemen who lunched. She could have chosen that life. She was expected to, but she didn't. She rejected it early on, driven by a relentless desire to prove her worth, to make something of herself by herself. She was, at heart, an artist, a painter, and writer, and she preferred to surround herself with creative people, people who were making things. My mom's longtime friend, Ben Brantley, who closely followed the comings and goings of New York society as a writer at W Magazine before becoming the theater critic for the New York Times, recently remarked to me, "I think there was a vestigial part of Gloria that felt they disapproved of her as a maverick. Gloria was instinctively repelled by anything that smacked of hierarchy with its codes of judgment." I think he's right. Like Caroline Astor and Alva Vanderbilt a century before, Brooke and Gloria looked alike only if you didn't know either of them very well. I saw Brooke Astor a number of times in the ensuing years and briefly chatted with her once or twice, but our last fleeting interaction was the most profound, for me at least. It happened at Mortimer's, only this time I was waiting tables in its newly opened sidewalk cafe the summer before my senior year in high school. I was, it should be noted, a terrible waiter. I was totally inexperienced, intimidated by the cooks, and unable to figure out a system to take care of several tables at once. I'd make an individual trip to get a diner more sugar or a new fork instead of covering multiple tasks per trip. As a result, I was always running around and yet always late to respond to a diner's request. I also sweated profusely in the summer heat, which no one likes to see in a waiter. It got so bad that I started suggesting customers might want to sit at tables I wasn't responsible for. Nevertheless, looking back, I see that it was one of the most valuable work experiences of my life. I never had to serve Mrs. Astor, which was lucky for both of us. She was not an outdoor cafe kind of customer. She sat inside with all the other regulars. But one harried afternoon, I ran into her as I was hurrying to the kitchen to place an order, and she was returning from the ladies' room. "Hello, Mrs. Astor," I said. She glanced at me for a split second, then kept walking. Now, keep in mind that every time she'd met me before, I'd been with my mom and wearing a blazer, and that on this day I was in my waiter's uniform of white shirt and dark pants.